Hi, welcome to a special episode of 90% Knitting. I'm Lisa, also known as Fiber Nymph on Ravelry and around the internet. And I'm recording today. This is not a regular episode. I did one last week, which was number 265, and I'll do 266 sometime this week. But this is the one that I said that I was going to do in order to answer the questions in the Knit Life survey. So this is just a little December extra. I might do another December extra video later on. I'm not doing Vlogmas. My hat's off to anyone who can record every single day up through the 24th. That's not in my capacity to do that. But I do have a couple ideas for some, just video extras throughout this month. So if I have the time, I'll do them. But I'm doing this one today. And I'm drinking some tea. It's Anna's tea from Tiba, which I enjoy. And I've got one of my holiday wintry mugs out. Got those out over the weekend. Anyway, I was tagged by Carol, who is Knits and Pearls, who has the A Stitch in Time podcast, which I did get to watch a couple episodes of. So that was very enjoyable. If you all are looking for a new video podcast that's really well done, then I would recommend checking Carol out. Anyway, Carol tagged me to do the Knit Life survey, which is going around, and a bunch of different podcasters are doing it. And then you're supposed to tag other podcasters, so I will name the people I'm tagging at the end. Anyway, it's just sort of fun. It's like one of those questionnaire kind of things. Sometimes you see them on Facebook, 20 questions about yourself, and they're just goofy questions. But these are actually fun because these are knit related, and I thought, why not? Might as well do this. If you've been watching the podcast for any amount of time, you probably will already know the answers to some of these questions for me, or you'll recognize some of the projects that I'm going to refer to. And if you're newer, then maybe you'll learn some things about me, since you maybe don't know me as well. Anyway, if you're going to watch this, thank you. It's, again, just for fun. And so, yeah, let's get started. It's a series of 25 questions. Some of which will probably have a little bit more in-depth answers than others. But the first question is, what sparked your interest in knitting? And the second question is, how and when did you learn to knit? I'm going to actually answer number 2 first. The first time I remember learning to knit was when I was probably around 8. And the church that I went to had like an after-school program, for kids on Wednesday afternoons that I went to. And sorry, Tippy's down here on the floor wandering around, so she's distracting me. Anyway, I went to that, and like the after dinner period of those was always like an activity time, and you got to choose from a bunch of different activities you wanted to do. And I remember choosing to learn how to knit one time. There was a knitting club, class, whatever they called it. And it was just one of the other girls' moms taught us how to knit. And it was a few different weeks. But what I remember is she invited all of the girls who were in that class to her house one Saturday to get together to knit. And it really didn't dawn on me until I was thinking about these questions that I attended my first knitting group way back when I was 8 years old. And I didn't even realize it. I think that's kind of funny. Anyway, that's when I learned how to knit. It's not something that I stuck with for any amount of time. It is something that I kind of picked up here and there and would do something and then put it down. Although I have to say, I also learned how to crochet as a kid, and I believe my grandmother taught me how to crochet. That's what I remember the most. And I tended to gravitate more towards crochet than knitting over the years, just because I remembered that more, and I really knew how to do granny squares. So that was my entry into the fiber arts. But what sparked my current interest in knitting was about 11 years ago when my mom moved to Florida. And the first year that she was in Florida, I spent a lot of time down there. I went down with the kids probably at least 4 times in that first year she was down there. And I remember being down there in January, and not far from her house, like kind of as you went to and from other places, there was this yarn shop that I would pass. And I always thought, oh, that looks like a really cute shop. I should stop in there. I mean, again, I wasn't knitting at the time. I wasn't, doing anything yarn related, but for whatever reason, I thought it would be a great idea to stop in there. And so I was out running around one day, and I did. I stopped in, and it was just amazing. There was this group over there. I don't know if it was a class or a knitting group, but they were all working. But then this woman came over and said, oh, can I help you? And I said, I haven't knit in a really long time, and I thought it would be kind of fun. Maybe I'd make my daughter a hat. And she goes, okay, and then she'd ask me questions. I'm like, I don't really remember much about it. I said, I need everything. I need yarn, I need needles. And so she said, well, why don't you go pick out whatever yarn you would like to use? And she kind of directed me towards a section of yarn that she would be appropriate, like so I didn't pick out lace weight or something, So I picked out some yarn. I don't remember what it was at this point, but I think it was probably like a DK weight yarn. And so she got me needles, and God bless her, she gave me 16-inch circulars. She did not give me DPNs. That was wonderful. I can't even imagine trying to teach myself how to use DPNs at that point. But anyway, she gave me the circulars, and I said, okay, I don't have a pattern or anything. She goes, you know what, you really don't need a pattern for a hat. She said, all you need to do is cast on, I think she told me like 80 stitches or 86 stitches. I mean, my daughter was young at the time. And she said, and just start knitting. She said, you don't even need to do ribbing. It'll roll. You'll get a cute little rolled brim hat. And I said, okay. And she explained about joining the stitches and not twisting them. And I said, well, eventually, this is going to take me a while, but eventually I'm going to have to make it smaller at the top, right? And she's like, well, yeah, you can, or you can just seam it across the top, or however you want to do it. And I said, well, I'm going to need help doing that. So I guess I'm going to have to find a yarn shop back at my house. She's like, wait a minute. She had a directory. And so she looked up the yarn shop that was closest to me, which literally was like 10 minutes from my house, and it's the one that I ended up working at later on. And so that's what got me into knitting. I started knitting this hat while I was at my mom's. I had to rip it out several times. I remember having to look up a YouTube video on how to cast on because I could not remember. And I did like the backwards thumb cast on, so it was super tight too. It wasn't a long-tailed cast on. But I got started, and I finally got it going without having it twisted. And then when I got home, I did find the yarn shop, and I went in and I said, I started this hat, and I need to know how to finish it. And so I got set up with a private lesson, and it was great. I learned how to knit, and then I took a few more private lessons, and inside of a few months, I actually had a job there. Which, God bless Bonnie, because, I knew nothing, and I was a very new knitter, and I didn't know much about yarn or its characteristics or what was good for what, but she hired me anyway. I mean, I only worked one day a week. But still, I was enthusiastic, and I was willing to learn, and so it was a very good learning experience to work at that yarn shop. But anyway, and now Bonnie helps me, so it's been like this full circle kind of thing. Anyway, that's kind of my long rambling story about what has sparked my interest in knitting. And I think originally when I decided I was going to knit my daughter a hat, my other thought was, oh, it'd be really cool to learn how to knit hats to get for charity. And so that was one of my main objectives too, which I have knit a lot of charity hats over the years. And I remember thinking it would be really cool to knit socks. And I don't even think I realized at the time that knitting socks was a thing. I'm sure I didn't, but I thought that would be cool to learn how to knit socks. So that's where it all started. Number 3 is, what is your favorite cast on method? Long-tailed cast on. I use a long-tailed cast on probably for, I would say, 98% of the projects I do. I will do a provisional cast on if that's needed for a particular project. I know how to do a cable cast on, and I'll do it if a pattern calls for doing that. But other than that, that is pretty much the extent of my cast on knowledge. Sad to say, I did recently just try to do a tubular cast on and ended up with a total hot mess. I want to pursue that just for the sake of learning it. I did take a class one time, I think at Loopy Spring Fling, one of those, on different cast-ons and bind-offs, which I thought were really interesting, but I didn't follow up and use any of them, so I lost them. I do have a book called Cast On, Bind Off, I believe. I can't remember who the author is, and I really should probably just go through it and learn some alternative cast-ons, you know, just to broaden my knowledge. But I mean, in general though, the long-tailed cast-on serves me quite well for pretty much everything I knit. Let's see, what is your favorite type of knitting design element? And they say brioche, lace, cables, color work, etc. I would say my favorite knitting design element would be anything with texture. Well, not anything. Texture in general I really like. Specifically, I love seed stitch, which I know I'm kind of in the minority there because a lot of people hate seed stitch because of the purling involved. I love seed stitch and variations on seed stitch. I also love cables. I enjoy cabling, and I especially enjoy cabling since I learned how to cable without a cable needle. So I've been doing that for the last several years, and that makes cabling way more enjoyable. Most recently, I'm really getting into color work. I mean, I've done color work projects over the years, but I'm really, really loving color work right now, and that seems to be my current infatuation. Lace, I like lace. I used to knit a lot more lace projects than I do. Not lace weight lace. That is not my thing at all. I just, no. But fingering weight shawls and things I have done. It's just not really been where I've been at lately. And brioche, honestly, you know, it's been such a big thing lately. It doesn't really appeal to me much because it creates such a big, bulky fabric so often. I think a lot of the designs look neat, but that big, bulky fabric is not something that would particularly be appealing to me to wear. I've made one brioche project in my life, and that was several years ago, and it was just one color brioche cowl that did not turn out all that well. It was very simple, but like I messed it up, and I like bound it off super tightly so it's kind of shaped like this. Yeah, it wasn't, and it was very, very heavy and bulky. Like I don't know, I never did much with it after that. I will say, however, the Oracle shawl pattern by Kristen from Wool and Vine, I think that is really pretty, and I know that has some brioche elements in it, and I think I would like to make that at some point in time. But other brioche patterns that I've seen just really don't jump out at me as something like, I really want to make that. Until recently. Just the other day, I came across this, I guess it's a scarf or something. Again, I don't have the pattern with me, but I'll be talking about it in a future episode, I'm sure. I looked at it and I knew that it was brioche. It was done with a whole bunch of different scraps, so it was very colorful, and it was fingering weight, so it was a little lighter. And I did actually buy that pattern. Again, I can't remember the name of it, but I think I'm going to give that a try. But anyway, that's like going through a whole lot of stuff. That's not the question. My favorite knitting design element, I would have to say, is probably seed stitch. Texture. Okay. How many projects are in your Ravelry queue? Oh, no, wait, I skipped one. I'm sorry. What is your favorite project that you've ever knit? That's a really hard question because I have a lot of things that I've knit that are favorites. I just did, you know, a thing about my favorites that I've been wearing lately. You know, if I had to pick one project, though, I would probably say my antler cardigan, just because it's a really pretty sweater. I love how it turned out. I love the yarn I used, and it turned out to be completely wearable because it fits me very, very well, and I would definitely make another one. So using all those criteria, the best of show kind of favorite project I ever knit, I would say, is my antler cardigan. Okay, how many projects are in my Ravelry queue? I believe 361. I don't know. I went in and looked right before I did this. I might be misremembering now, but I know it's a lot. I use my queue. Anything I see that I think I might want to knit someday, I will put in my queue. My favorites, however, I use more for things that I see that I think are neat, but I wouldn't necessarily want to knit for myself or anyone else. Or if I see something that I know I do want to knit, and there's good project notes or tips or a color combination that I really like, I'll favorite that. But pattern wise, I kind of go willy-nilly, and I'll put whatever patterns in there that I really like, that I think, oh, I might make that someday. I do go through it every once in a while and weed things out because, you know, tastes change over the years. But yeah, I have a lot in my queue, but it's fun because I can kind of shop my queue, you know, go in, and if I'm in the mood for a certain type of project, then I can go and look and see what I've already queued. And sometimes that's really good because I forget about things that I've queued, and then I find them again, and that's fun. I just recently added a whole bunch of things to my queue when I was on my pattern shopping extravaganza last week. I had to cull my shopping cart a good bit before the end of that. So things that I took out of my shopping cart, I added to my queue. That's the other thing I find, and I don't know if you guys do this or not, but you might buy a pattern on Ravelry, but you don't actually add it to your queue. I do that a lot. I figure if it's in my Ravelry library, I'll find it there, because that's the other thing I do. Like when I search for patterns that I might want to make, like, you know, in that advanced search option, you can choose, you know, patterns in my library. I think you can also choose patterns in my queue, maybe, or favorites. I don't remember. I'm sorry. I've got this weird piece of hair right in my eyes. Yeah, so I'm not sure. Maybe I should probably remember to put things I've purchased also in my queue, but I feel like I find them one way or another because I search both when I'm looking for projects. So anyway, okay. Number 7, what is your favorite weight of yarn to work with? Again, I don't know that I have a favorite. I mean, I work with fingering weight a lot because I knit a ton of socks, so I really do enjoy fingering weight. But then for hats, I definitely prefer DK or worsted, or bulky sometimes, but for my own hats, I tend to use DK or worsted. Unless it's a color work hat, then I would be using fingering most likely. I like doing sport weight things, socks. I'll do sport weight socks sometimes. Pretty much I'm open to anything from fingering on up. I do not like lace weight. I just have never fallen in love with it. I find it very fiddly. So yeah. But I would say the things that I knit most with are probably fingering weight and either DK or worsted. So those would have to be my favorites, I guess, if I had to call one a favorite. What was your first knitting project? Well, aside from when I was a kid learning to knit, and I can't remember what we knit, I actually still have all that stuff someplace. I don't remember what we were supposed to be knitting, like a swatch basically. But my first project for this current age of my knitting that started like 11 years ago was a hat for my daughter. It all began with a hat. What is, let me see, number 9 here. What is the longest time you have had a half-finished project in hibernation? What is it, and when did you cast it on? And do you still want to finish it? Well, interesting you should ask that, Knit Life survey, because I've been going through my hibernating whips recently in preparation for January's Finish It or Frog It marathon that I'm planning. And aside from 2 socks that were design projects that I cast on back in like 2012 and never finished, my longest hibernating whip is a shawl called the Industrial Revolution shawl. Let me get to that page because I can't remember all of the details about it. Industrial Revolution shawl by Hannah Breitz. I started this back in March of 2013. It is a pie shawl, for one thing. I am not good at knitting round things. I've never successfully knit a round shawl yet. This shawl, though, like I said, I'm doing it out of Blue Sky Fibers Baby Alpaca, which is a sport weight. And I had this gold color and an orange color. I love the colors, but I had several balls of each in my stash. And for whatever reason, I thought that they would make a really great shawl. And this is the shawl I chose. Aside from the fact that I am bad at knitting round things, this shawl also has baubles, which baubles, as much as I love texture, baubles are definitely not one of my favorite textural elements. So I'm thinking that was probably one of the reasons that I've slowed down on, or slowed down, that's like an understatement. I think the last time I worked on this, let's see. The last time I worked on this was back in August of 2014. And at that point I said, I think I figured out where I left off, but my stitch count is wonky. That sounds promising, doesn't it? And then in January of 2016, I added a note to my project page that said, I stole the US 6 needles out of this, and for lack of having a different pair to put in it, I put in US 7s, but I don't think it's gonna matter much. That's hilarious. So yeah, that's where that is. And the question, what was the question? It was, oh gosh, now I have to get back to my questionnaire here. When did you cast it on? Okay. Do you still want to finish it? I think I do. I really like the colors. I really like the yarn. I don't like the baubles so much, but I don't know. And I honestly have no idea how much further I have to go. I feel like I do have a good ways to go. I don't think it's that big. I'll have to show it to you guys sometimes on the podcast. But again, you know, that's the other thing. You know, those pie shawls, they basically look like sacks while they're on the circular needle. So I don't know. I think I want to finish it. I'm still thinking about that. But that's my longest hibernating whip. What is the largest project you've ever knit? I've done some Afghans, so I would say yardage-wise, that's probably the largest project that I have ever done is Afghans. What is the worst and just overall bad, didn't work out thing you ever knit? Explain what went wrong. Well, that would be the hemlock ring shawl or blanket, I guess it was called, which I believe is a Jared Flood pattern. It's a pie shawl, round, here we are again. Not only is it a round shawl, it also has tons of feather and fan in it, which I fail at round shawls, and I have never successfully knit large quantities of feather and fan. I don't know why. I just have such a hard time with it, which makes it really ironic that I currently have 2 shawls on the needles that both end with a lot of feather and fan, but at least they're not in the round. Anyway, I ended up stopping that shawl, that blanket, way early because my stitch count was so off. My feather and fan was so mutated. I think in my project pages, I do have it listed as the mutant hemlock ring because it looks like a giant amoeba. It's just so misshapen. So yeah, that's probably my worst project that just didn't turn out well at all. What is your favorite kind of project to make? Again, that favorite question is so hard. I am such an equal opportunity knitter. It would probably be easier for me to say what I don't like knitting. I'm not crazy about knitting stuffed toy things, although I actually have some of those that I really would like to make. I just find them terribly fiddly most of the time. Yeah, that's really the only thing I've ever really stayed away from in general. I don't do a lot of baby knits just because I don't have babies to knit for, but it's not really that I don't like knitting baby things. Yeah, that's kind of it. I mean, there's specific things that I prefer making more than others. I know I'm totally answering this question backwards because it was like, what's your favorite kind of project to make? Okay, I'll answer the question. I love doing socks, but you probably know that if you watch me. I love doing socks, I love doing cowls, and I love doing hats. Those are probably my top 3 favorite projects to knit. I'm definitely an accessory knitter over a garment knitter, though I would really like to change that because I desperately want more hand knit sweaters. The one I'm wearing, actually, I mean, it's short sleeved, and I would stand up, but I'm not going to because the bottom part of this sweater is a little funky. It looks better from here up. This is a hand spun sweater. Actually, I spun for this, and this was a test knit that I did years ago for Cosette Cornelius Bates, and it's the croquet sweater. I like it though. I throw it on every once in a while. Anyway, where was I going with that? Oh, about sweaters. Yeah, I'd like to knit more sweaters. I love knitting shawls too, and I do them fairly regularly. So it's so hard to answer favorites. I mean, if I had to say what is my absolute favorite thing, like if I was stuck on a desert island and somebody said you can only knit one thing ever for the rest of your remaining time here, I would say it would probably be socks, just because I really enjoy socks. So, okay. What is your favorite type of fiber to work with? Wool and wool blends. I'm fine with superwash wool. I mean, all of the yarns that I dye for my shop are all superwashed, and I enjoy knitting with those. However, I do very much love and appreciate non-superwash wools, the crunchier kind. I just bought a whole bunch of it from the woolly thistle that I showed you on the last podcast. I have a deep appreciation for that kind of wool. I guess I would just say it depends on the projects, you know, what I use it for. I would say probably I'm not super crazy about plant fibers. I have knit with hemp and linen, and they're okay. And I use cotton, but mostly just for dishcloths. Like, I have tried to knit other things out of cotton, and I haven't really enjoyed it. As far as other animal fibers, I like blends, like wool and silk blends. I like that shawl I was just talking about. That's alpaca. I have made an alpaca sweater. Alpaca is not my favorite yarn to knit with because it has no memory and it's super warm. But I wouldn't say there's any fiber that I would completely rule out. Acrylic has its place. It's definitely not a fiber I enjoy working with, but you know, I'm knitting that Afghan for my oldest son, and I'm using a very inexpensive acrylic to make it because that is the best choice for that particular Afghan going to that particular house. So, and it's fine. It's nice. It's soft. You know, it all depends on the project and the recipient and what you want, I think. So, are you a self-proclaimed yarn snob? I don't think so. Like I just said, you know, I think all yarns have their place. Personal preference is the main thing. You know, as a knitter, you have to enjoy what you're knitting with. I do not enjoy knitting with squeaky acrylic, so I don't. You know, I don't enjoy knitting with plant fibers that make my hands hurt, so I don't. Do I have a problem going to Joann's or Pat Catan's or Michael's and buying inexpensive yarns? No, I do that. I mean, I don't need to as much as maybe other people on another budget. I mean, I'm not saying I've got money out the wazoo, but I am very fortunate that, you know, I have a yarn business and I, in that way, can afford yarns that I know other people can't always afford. And I'm also fortunate that I'm able to shop at places like the Woolly Thistle and get, you know, the kind of yarns that I really, really enjoy. I mean, obviously, I have to budget for it. I can't just go willy-nilly all the time and place orders, although I would love to. But I don't consider that snobbery. I would never look at somebody else's yarn and their project and say, ew, I can't believe you're knitting with that. You know, I wouldn't do that because, again, there's 100 reasons why everybody knits with what they knit with, and that's none of my concern. I knit with what I enjoy, and yeah, I guess that's it. I don't consider myself a yarn snob. What is your dream knitting retreat or fiber festival to attend? Well, I've attended a lot of different fiber festivals, from really big ones like Rhinebeck in Maryland to smaller local ones, and they are all very nice. They all have their pluses and minuses. I've also been fortunate enough to do some retreats, which they've all been larger though. Like, I've done the Loopy Spring Fling. I got to do that a few times. I've been to SSK a few times. I did the Zombie Knit Apocalypse one time. And they're all very enjoyable. I am the type of person who gets very peopled out though. So those large events kind of exhaust me after a while and I have to retreat to my room. I think my favorite, my dream knitting retreat would be something very, very small and private. I have so enjoyed hearing about Sarah from Yarns at Yinhu, Sarah Pomegranate, and Sarah from Fiber Trek, and Emily from Fibertown, and Claire from New Hampshire Knits talk about their recent little friends retreat that they did out in that secluded little cabin somewhere. That would be my dream knitting retreat. Me and a few good knitting friends getting together for a weekend of just, fun and fellowship with each other and, knitting and just relaxed and being out in nature somewhere. And that would be my dream knitting retreat. Unfortunately, I don't know if that'll ever happen because I don't really have a lot of in-person knitting friends that could happen with, realistically, at least not that are local enough or close enough. I mean, I know the four of them had distance, but they're all kind of on the East Coast, so it makes it easier. But I've actually toyed with the idea of trying to put together oops, sorry, I bumped the table, like a knitting weekend just for a small group of knitters, but I wouldn't really know how to go about planning that, so I don't know. Maybe someday I will, but that would be because I don't need the classes. I like taking classes sometimes, but that's not my thing for a knitting retreat. I'd rather just sit around and relax and have my girl time and, eat, drink, be merry, knit. That's my idea of fun. What is my oldest yarn in my stash? I have a few bins that still contain yarn that I purchased from the yarn shop that I used to work at. And so I would say that yarn dates back to probably 2017. No, 2007. I'm sorry, 2007. 2017 is this year. Oh my gosh. So yeah, like 10 years old. I've got yarn that's 10 years old. I can't tell you exactly what it is. I've got a lot of it, but are you a gifty knitter or a selfish knitter? First of all, I do not believe in the term selfish knitting. I hate that term. I think if you're a knitter and you knit for yourself, there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. But I would say, do I just knit for myself or do I just knit for other people? I do both regularly and I enjoy doing both. What do you like to watch or listen to while you knit? Well, I almost always have podcasts on, video or audio while I'm knitting. Sometimes I have an audiobook on. Very rarely will no, I can't say rarely. I just haven't been doing it very often, like watching a movie like on Netflix or something like that, or DVD. Occasionally I'll do that, but that's more like in the evening. But like my morning knitting time, it's usually my morning knitting and coffee and podcasts. So, do you prefer wood or metal needles? I would have to say it depends. I have a favorite of each, actually. I love Hayahayas, the regular and the sharps. The regular is actually more than the sharps, but I like both. I like them because they're lightweight, and I like the cable on them. And I will use those. Like when I'm going into my needle storage and I have to pick needles out, those are the ones I look for first. Or the Knitter's Pride Dreams wooden needles. Those I really love because I like the wood on them. They're nice and polished. The only problem with those is I can't do socks on those because those smaller sized wooden needles feel like toothpicks to me and I'm always afraid I'm going to snap them. So for anything but socks, anything that I need to use those small gauge, but anything I would say from about a US 3 on up, the Knitter's Prides are lovely. I love those. So I look for either those or my Hayahayas first. And if I can't find the right size, then I've got Addie's, like Addie Turbo. Like I used to buy those a lot. So I have a good number of those. But I think and I have a few Chagu needles still. Well, not still, but I've got some Chagu needles. But other than that, so I would say that's mostly metal needles. Yeah, the Knitter's Pride Dreams are the only wooden needles I really like. Let's see, where am I? Is there a pattern or project that you have knit more than one time? Yes. All of my vanilla socks. I mean, it's not really a pattern, I guess, but I've knit countless pairs of vanilla socks, vanilla hats, because I enjoy them and they're easy and I can do them without thinking. My elongated triangular shawl pattern that is basically not a pattern that I've really written down other than on project pages, but it's my own formula that I use. I throw in other different design elements on different shawls, but it's basically the same pattern. I've done that several times. I'm sure there are some other, like the Wind's Chief hat, Stephen West's Wind's Chief hat. I made a bunch of those for gifts one year. There are patterns that I've done multiples of, but usually that's for gifts. I would definitely make another antler cardigan. I mean, I've talked about that, like doing that cardigan, but maybe switching out the cables to something else, you know, like to a different cable motif. So, yeah. Okay, just for fun, the last 5 questions. Do you have any other hobbies? Well, I have spinning, and I will soon be dipping my toe back into the pool of weaving because I did purchase a loom. I used to have a loom. I used it once. I was overwhelmed by it. It was a 24-inch table loom, rigid heddle loom. I sold it, and then I've resisted the urge until last weekend not last weekend, but the weekend prior, Thanksgiving weekend, during all the sales, I purchased an Ashford 10-inch sample it loom, which I do not have yet. It's not here yet. So I'm sure you'll be hearing more about that, but I have specific things I would like to be able to use that for. So I will be getting back into that. But aside from fiber arts kind of hobbies, none that I'm really active in anymore. I mean, I love photography. I just don't have a whole lot of time to do creative photography. You know, I take pictures of my yarn all the time for the shop, but that's not the same. I used to scrapbook like crazy. Again, I just don't have the time to do that. I still have all the supplies, but yeah, there's things I'd like to scrapbook, but I don't have the time to do it. But then, like, if you think about like outdoor activities, like I love to kayak, so I guess that's a hobby. I love to ride my bike, go camping, go do stuff like that with my husband, outdoorsy kind of stuff, hiking. If you consider those hobbies, yeah, those are hobbies for me. Riding motorcycles, I guess that's more of a form of transportation at this point for me, though, than an actual hobby. I don't know. I'm really hoping in the coming year we're going to take like a long motorcycle trip. I would love to do that. I'm trying to convince my husband that I can handle it. We'll see. Okay, what is your favorite snack? I would say potato chips. That's always been my favorite, like snack food snack. I love potato chips. I don't buy them very often because I love them a little too much. I don't keep them in the house. If I am really just munchy and want something, I'll eat cheese. I love cheese. Cheese is awesome. And it's funny because Bill is not a big cheese eater, like my husband. Like, he likes cheese, but like, that's not a food he would just gravitate towards to eat by itself. Like, he'll put it on a sandwich. But ever since we've been married and I do the grocery shopping, like, he'll help me unpack groceries and I'll buy like 4 different kinds of cheese. He's like, this is a lot of cheese. And I'm like, is there a problem? Like, I do not see an issue with this at all because I like variety and I love cheese. Sometimes that's what I eat for lunch, like cheese and crackers. Or cheese and crackers and pepperoni. Oh my gosh, that sounds really good. And I'm so hungry right now. I might have to have that for my lunch. Cheese, we'll say cheese is my favorite snack. What is your favorite color? Oh my gosh, I'm a dyer. How am I supposed to pick one? I love colors in general, but if I have to pick just one, I would say red. Red is definitely a favorite color. Deep, rich reds. I love red. Do you have pets? And if so, tell us about them. Well, if you've been watching the podcast for any amount of time, you know the answer to that. I have a very neurotic miniature schnauzer named Muffin, who has been tapping around here. I think she's finally landed, though. She's probably, I'm trying to think. I think I've had her for about 8 years now. And she was 3 or 4 when we got her, so she's probably about 12. And I can hear her. She's sleeping. She's snoring. She snores like crazy. Worse than I do. In fact, it's really funny. My husband will wake up sometimes at night and he'll think I'm snoring. And then he realizes it's Muffin. Her bed is like right outside our bedroom door. And he can hear her all the way from out there. And then we have all the cats. I mean, I have my cat Babette, who is still living back at my house because that's where my son is still. But eventually she'll be up here with us. But then we have 5 cats up here now. We had 6, but Princess unfortunately decided to venture out onto the road and was killed recently. So we do not have Princess anymore. But we have 5 cats, the newest of which was Tippy, who you have seen on the podcast from time to time. She is going for her... to get spayed tomorrow. So keep Tippy in your thoughts. She's not going to be very happy with me, I don't think. Yeah, that's probably more than you needed to know about my pets, huh? And last but not least, coffee or tea? Well, I like both. I start my day with coffee. Usually I switch to tea later in the day. Like, I can get coffee'd out. Some days I'll drink coffee all day. But, you know, a lot of days by 10 or 11, I'm kind of coffee'd out. And then if I'm thirsty later in the day, I make myself some tea. So I switched to tea earlier today because it's not even noon. But herbal tea. I prefer herbal teas. Yeah, so coffee and tea, gin, rum, good beer. I'll drink anything. But that wasn't part of the question. So I guess you didn't need to know that. Anyway, all right. Well, that is all 25 questions that I think I've answered in more detail than you probably needed to know. I'm sorry I don't have props. I kind of wished I had some of my things here that I could have showed you, like my giant amoeba hemlock ring. That would have been awesome to show you. But unfortunately, those kind of things are more at my house still than up here. So I didn't have them. And I figured, you know what, I'm just going to do this. And I'll talk. I know I talked a lot. A lot of the projects that I talked about, though, you can find on my project pages. So if you have any questions about anything I answered, feel free to ask it. Message me, or I guess I'll put a thread up to let you guys know that this is up. But I hope you enjoyed it. I had fun answering the questions. I was processing the video, and I got to the end, and I realized, darn it, I forgot to record who I was tagging to do the Knit Life survey after me. So I have 5 podcasters that I'm going to tag. The first one is Melissa from the Malfrian Designs podcast. So Melissa, you're up. And then I'm going to tag Carrie and Darlene from Knitters Gotta Knit. Darlene is Bags by Awesome Granny Darlene. So you too, I'd love to hear from you. And lastly, I'm going to tag Anna and Sarah from the Behind the Wool audio podcast, which is a pretty new audio podcast. They've only got a few episodes out right now. It is audio, but I don't see any reason why an audio podcaster could not take part in doing the survey. So I will message all 5 of you to make sure that you know I've tagged you. But I would love to hear your answers to all these questions too. Anyway, sorry about that. Now we'll get back to the original. Actually, you know what? No, we won't. I'm just going to say goodbye because that's all I said, I think, when I realized that I hadn't put this part in there. So anyway, thanks for watching, and I'll see you later this week with a regular episode. Bye.